Yo, what's good, YouTube? What's good? It's Stormy B, man, and I am back. And welcome this Saturday morning, April 4th, 2020, to another edition of the Three Wise Men of Boxing. That's right, we are back, and we are here to discuss the sport of boxing with you, where we're calling this particular episode Point, Counterpoint on Matches. And out of that, we will be featuring Roberto Duran. I want to say what's up to everybody that's out there. Thank you for tuning in. And as we introduce the panel this morning, we got my brother Scrapbook Boxing here to greet everybody this morning. How you doing, Scrap? How you doing?
I'm good, Stormy. How you feel today, my brother?
Oh, I'm okay, man. A little down that we don't have our brother with us this morning, Kurt Sugar, a.k.a. Kurt Anderson. I got that flipped around. Kurt is under the weather. And Scrap, would you like to say a word on behalf of our brother, Kurt Anderson, man?
Yeah, first of all, good morning to the chat. We don't have our brother with us this morning, a little under the weather. And he's a very big inspiration to me. When I speak with Curtis Anderson, I feel as though I'm speaking to myself because we have similar backgrounds in and out of boxing. And without his presence today, it's somewhat of an empty spot in my conversation. And Curtis has a very good background in boxing. Right? And he started in Newark, and he went to all the gyms there. A Street Gym, where you had great fighters, Marvin Hagler and James Hard Rock Green, James Scott. That's a big deal because a lot of the old-time trainers were in those gyms. Those gyms are now torn down, but the background that he has gotten is very vital, and it's a great contribution to those who listen to him. Take the time to listen to what he has to say. Him and I were in Lenny Shaw's boxing gym. It's in Totowa, New Jersey, on Totowa Avenue. And you had old-time trainers there. You had great fighters that went through that gym. So he has a tremendous background. He knew Rocky Lockridge personally. Hung out with him many times. They threw him a block party after the Gomez fight. They were very upset with him because they felt he could have done more. That's the relationship he had with those fighters. And I just want to give respect to him, and hopefully he recovers quickly and gets back with us, not just for boxing, just in general. So, salute to my brother Curtis Anderson. We need you, brother. Get back as soon as possible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We will all keep the brother with us, even though he's not here with us on the show today. He's still with us in spirit, and we will continue to acknowledge him and hope for him to get better in what he's dealing with. So I wanted to say, Scrapbook, just talking about Kurt one more time. You know, with the knowledge and everything that he brings, I like to express to our listening audience and viewers that, you know, when you have someone who has that type of knowledge and experience that he could bring to something like what we enjoy here when we talk about this beloved sport of ours, it shouldn't be taken lightly, because there are so many people who are not students of the sport as well as scholars of the sport. And to have that and have someone who can share with you and pass that on, where you can grasp hold of it and make it a part of your experience as you go forward and you carry it forward. That's one of the things about community that we're losing the principles on. I'm not sure if you agree with that or not, but that's what I feel. And I was just saying on my Friday night chop session last night, we got the brother Reggie Owens, Boxing Conversations with Reggie Owens. Shout out to him. In this time that we've had the hiatus from boxing, where live pro sports is in general is put on hold, he's taken it upon himself to go back and start calling some fights that have already happened, as well as some fights that go back a little bit in history. And I was commending him and acknowledging him and passing on the fact that how significant and important that is. Not to just do it because there's nothing else to do and I'm going to do this and fill the airways with this because I can't talk boxing at the moment, so I'll put this out there. No, he's actually going back. He's studying the fights even before he calls them, and he's going over the points and everything, and he's taking it from a studious standpoint. And I told him that that's great because he has his own group of listeners and viewers, and they, for some of them that may not be aware of those matches, he's doing a very good thing by bringing that into the present, and it may make some of them take to boxing even more deeper, and they start researching and going back into the archives of fights and everything, and that will only help them as when the sport resumes, they know what they're seeing, and then they can make a better assessment of looking at boxing through a different lens. And they can tell, like when we say some of these guys, they don't measure up to what we knew of from past dates, they'll be able to correctly see that as well and not be so opinionated because they only know who's fighting today, but because they've been introduced to what was or what once was, and that having that knowledge and say, hey, this guy doesn't dig deep like the other guy did. This guy doesn't train hard like the other guy. This guy doesn't stay in shape like the other guy. This guy isn't well skilled and tooled like the other guy. Well, that's what that does for you as a sport. What are your thoughts on that, Scrapbook?
Well, for one, I want to definitely I want to commend Reggie Owens. I realize that he does do that. I've watched him grow on his platform. He sees a different side than when he first came on, and that's what it's about. And he's very active. I mean, you never stop getting news feeds from Reggie Owens. And he's a tremendous part of the community, and I want to salute him for his hard work. I see Drew Titan. I want to salute him as well because he's adding a tremendous amount of information to health and fitness, as well as interviews of old fighters. Mahari Nation and Gigi. Gigi really pushed me to try and be the best that I could be. Gil Coles, Corner Girl 66. Everybody has contributions. I see the brother Eric Jenkins, and I want to thank all of them for contributions to this sport. I've been involved in this sport since 7 years old. I've met everybody that you can think of in boxing of significance, from fighters to trainers to historians. I've met them. And when we were talking about Curtis doesn't do this on the air. He feels as though he doesn't want to show up. I said, Curtis, speak your mind. Curtis can tell you from 1600s to current, he can tell you the fight record. He can tell you the delays, the postponement of a fight. He can tell you things that you can't possibly read in a book anywhere. And a lot of people don't know that about him because he doesn't go there. He just speaks sometimes the minimum. He is a tremendous asset. And we have the same background because I was doing that when I was 18 years old. I could tell you the entire almost encyclopedia of boxing, the top of my head. Sometimes we miss a note here and there because we're human. But that's what I admire about Curtis. He took the time to really focus on the game. And that's what we all need to applaud. That's what we need to focus on. You need to go back. You're not going to know anything in life until you understand the history of it. And you can say things and talk tough and everything else, but people can read right through that because it's a facade. it shows that you don't really know the ins and outs of what you're talking about. So you cover it up with all kind of crazy talk. And I don't focus on that. I focus on the logistics. I focus on the reality of what a man is talking about. And if he can't come with stats, he can't come with figures, he can't come with, things that really justify what he's talking about, he's not saying anything. And that's why I'm on your show, Stormy. That's why I ride with Curtis Anderson and all the brothers and sisters, that's in the community, because everyone has something to say of significance, and I'm proud of all of them.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. And I don't consider this my show. I consider it our show, because it couldn't be done without you and he and our viewers out there. I am very selfless when it comes to something like that, and just want to say that I feel fortunate to be able to do what we're doing and create what we've created for a sport that is dear to me, as well as everyone who participates, because that's why we are here, because the sport is dear to us. And the seriousness of how we go about this is imperative, because there are people who are not necessarily in the know about the sport of boxing as detailed as some of us are. So there's a certain amount of responsibility that comes with this whole presentation, conversation. And I'm just glad to be a part of that. A couple years ago, I couldn't even imagine myself being a part of something like this, but it just goes to show you never know what the future holds. So I hope to continue the process of bringing that type of quality and upholding it and presenting it to everybody. So, yeah, I consider myself a part of it, but it's not me. You know what I mean? So, that being said, go ahead, Scrap.
No, I'm saying thank you very much for those kind words. And I do appreciate your presence as well as having this show with you as well. Absolutely. And Brother Curtis Anderson.
Yeah. So that being said, we can move right on into the subject of today, point, counterpoint on matches. And today it'll feature Duran. The irony of this is the point, counterpoint title and subject is something that I had brainstormed with Kurt, and we were going to do this anyway from time to time. And we'll just, because this show is also kind of like a letter to Kurt, let him know that we're thinking about him in his absence. This is something we had come up with, point, counterpoint. A lot of times when we talk about points and counterpoints, some people may think of it as debating. Some people may think of it as opposing, but it's not only those things, but it's also taking the subject and dissecting it. My part of dissecting, your part of dissecting, even the chat's part of dissecting whoever the subject at hand is. And in today's feature, it'll be Roberto Duran with 3 fights that really stood out in his career. The first match we will consider in this point counterpoint would be Duran's, they called it on the cover of Sports Illustrated, redemption fight, where after the No Mas fight against Leonard, and he was disgraced and people had horrible things to say about him. You think today is bad with shaming. Duran endured a great deal of shaming back then, and we didn't even have social media. So just understand how horrible, even more horrible it could have been when he quit against Leonard in their rematch. But in this fight, he came back to take on Davey Moore, and who was a world champion at junior middleweight. And since Scrapbook was at the fight, I will let him lay the landscape on this fight for everybody. Go ahead, Scrap.
Yeah, Storm, you faded out for a moment. Which fight did you want me to talk about?
This is the Roberto Duran and Davey Moore.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Davey Moore fight. I knew Davey Moore personally. That fight took place June 1st, 1983. Roberto Duran turned 32 years old. It was on his birthday. And it took place in New York's Madison Square Garden. What was supposed to happen in that fight, Roberto Duran was not supposed to be on that card. Davey Moore, that was his sixth title defense. And he was supposed to be fighting a fighter by the name of Tony Ayala. Tony Ayala wound up getting into some trouble. He got convicted. So out went Tony Ayala, in came Roberto Duran. Now the issue with that, Roberto Duran didn't fight like Tony Ayala. He was aggressive like him. But he was more witty. 1972, he defeated Ken Buchanan with a lightweight championship belt. And it was controversial because they say he hit him after the bell and he hit him low. Roberto Duran was that kind of fighter. He knew how to exploit your weaknesses. He did what you were vulnerable to as soon as he met you. What he did in that Davey Moore fight was he rode the punches, had you thinking he was getting hit hard because of the sweat of his hair. That's an old school trick. See, he had Ray Arcel in his corner. And Roberto Duran was just that kind of a person where he liked it. He's going to hit you back twice. Davey Moore didn't have the experience for that. Now, Davey Moore was a decorated amateur. He lived on 168th Street in the projects there. You had Iran Barkley. You had a lot of guys there. They had the gang called Black Spades. He was a tough guy. But he didn't have the IQ when it comes to the A-level status of defending against a fighter like Roberto Duran. That's what the problem was. And Roberto Duran thumbed Davey Moore, and he hit him in a vulnerable area at the same time. Harry Greb and a lot of other fighters used to do things like that. But the problem in that fight, and I'm sitting probably about four rows from the ringside, you had a police presence that was, uncontrollable because of the fight that happened before that fight. And David Telesco, there was an issue with the glove with Panama. And it didn't start on time. And there was a lot of fights in the audience. So when Davey Moore came out, everyone booed Davey Moore. And that's his hometown. Everybody was there for Roberto Duran. So that got into the head of Davey Moore. He didn't know how to handle that. And when Roberto Duran, he came in, although they supported him, he was still a victim of the no mas in 1980 with Sugar Ray Leonard. So that was a point of redemption. So he had that in his mind. And my God, when that bell rang, Roberto Duran almost knew immediately how to handle Davey Moore. Because you can see him allowing Davey Moore to exploit himself. And that's what master fighters do. They allow you to exploit yourself. Show what you're vulnerable to. And it probably took no more than 20 seconds before Roberto Duran knew how to handle him. And that seventh round, when Davey Moore was dropped, it was a beautiful combination. What Roberto Duran did, he feinted the left hand. He threw a wide left hand hook. He didn't want to land because Davey Moore had already been thumbed that he had slaughtered at that point. That's another old school move. And he blinded Davey Moore, and Davey Moore never saw the right. And the way Davey Moore fell on that floor and landed his neck on the bottom strand of the ropes, you thought it was over with. But Davey Moore had so much heart, and he got up. And it wound up going to the 8th round, and they stopped the fight. But the beating that Davey Moore took, it reminded me, that fight reminded me of Julio Cesar Chavez and Mildred Taylor, March 17th, 1990. In that, Mildred Taylor was taking beatings that you didn't realize he was taking. And In this case, it was a little more evident with Davey Moore. But it was the difference between the experience of a fighter. And Roberto Duran was such a crafty veteran that he would make grunting sounds when you hit him, although you may not even hit him, just to make you think as though you hurt him. He wanted you to continue to throw arsenal so he can counter you. And the short punches he threw on the inside, he threw hooks and uppercuts and short right hands on the inside, kept turning Davey Moore, kept moving Davey Moore 2 steps to the right, 2 steps back, 2 steps to the left. Why that's significant? A lot of people don't understand. That's not your natural movement. You don't move naturally like that. So it takes more out of you. So
can I chime in? Can I chime in a bit there as you talk about that scrap? Okay. I just watched the fight again a couple of days ago, I'm sorry. And I had a chance because I wanted to study Duran's victory here. And just to carry on with what you were saying, he realized early on that Moore was a good fighter. He could box, but he didn't have the same experience in fighting. And Duran was a fighter who had technically sound skills. And when you talked about him exploiting Moore, like you said, 20 seconds in, he could see certain things. I noticed the way that he went to the body on Moore in this fight was like a fighter in the gym when he's working the bag, the heavy bag. And the body punches that he was putting on Moore was landing so clean that Moore didn't know how to protect himself. And that was one of the exploitation moments that Duran had. You know how fighters keep their elbows tucked and things like that, and they could turn with shots and stuff. Moore didn't have that. He didn't have that knack. And Duran, as you said, was using his footwork to position him. He was moving around him. And my goodness, when he was throwing uppercuts to the breadbasket and left hooks to the liver and left hooks to the mid of the belly, he was sapping the guy's legs, and the guy couldn't move even more because the body work that he was putting in was so essential. And then when he would come up top, every once in a while, hit him with a solid straight right hand, not trying to knock him out early, but punishing him. Boom, he would drop it and then go back to rolling his shoulders and getting in and acting like he want to clinch and then open up with a volley underneath. It was beautiful as far as when we watch boxing and we know someone who knows what they're doing, painting that canvas, painting a picture. It was that type of thing. I just wanted to offer that as I was watching, because I noticed that Duran was enjoying the moment of like, oh, I got this sucker. And he was breaking him down. It was a slow burn, but it was masterful and skillful.
Yeah, Stormy, I missed almost half of what you said. I don't know why you blanked out on my end, but I caught basically what you said, the last few seconds of what you just said. Yes, you're absolutely right. And that's what my point was. Roberto Duran, that was the most perfect breakdown of a fighter that you can find. Because what Roberto Duran did, when you punch a fighter in the eye and you target his nostrils, you're hampering his breathing. So when you go to the body, you're taking out whatever's left. And if you notice, always 9 seconds before the end of the round, he would finish off with a combination. And it was mostly towards the corner of Roberto Duran. And Davey Moore had to walk back. See, all these little things old school trainers know about. They know about these things. They don't use pads. Old school trainers understand. And he had Ray Arcel, and he had Whitey, was it Whitey Bimstein? It might have been Whitey Bimstein. I think he was still around. And he had those kind of guys in his corner, because that's how you break a man down. You allow, like martial arts, you're very good at that. You know to make him use his weight against himself. And that's what you do in a boxing ring. You break the man down by making him use his most valuable attributes. And you weaken him on his own valuable attributes. David Moore liked to bounce around. So he took his legs away from him. He hit him, like you say, in the breadbasket, in the solar plexus. He hit him in the duramius. He disrupted his mandibular. And these are the kind of things that you do to break a man down. He had him turning. He had him going backwards, 1 step, 2 steps to the side, and 1 step to the front. It's not your natural movement. So all that breathing is what slowed him down. The body work was beautiful. The inside short left hooks were beautiful. Underneath the armpit, he was hitting him on the shoulder blades. He would turn him. The things that he did is masterful. So when you I don't want to have a conversation and comparing fights, Martin. You're not going to see that kind of fight today because in the training it's a total different. That's why when we go back to the 40s and 50s, the difference in training, the difference in outcome, because the breaking down of a fighter, Earl Spence is the closest with his body work, his inside fighting. Terrence Crawford, another one. They're the closest. But when you got a guy like a Roberto Duran and you don't know how to offset him, he's going to beat you half to death. Chavez was another good one like that. So, yeah, very good point, Stormy.
Yeah, as I was watching the fight, when Duran stepped outside to box and shoot the jab, he was doing it when he wanted to. He was controlling the fight, dictating the tempo and pace of the fight, controlling the distance. He would move in when he wanted to. He stopped more from being able to move away. So Duran was able to operate at his own comfort and convenience. All the while, Moore not realizing what Duran was doing to him. And the body work, I can't stress. If you want to see, I know in boxing we've had Mike McCallum, who they call the body puncher, the body snatcher, I'm sorry. In this fight, Duran was every bit the body snatcher. I mean, I don't know if I can recall a better display of body punching and sapping a guy's legs to make him stand there to be available to what you want to do to him. And like you said, the thumbing of the eye, which caused a very big problem for Moore and a deficit because he couldn't see certain shots, and Duran staying on that side technically so he couldn't see and getting off those double left hooks to the liver and to the ribs, or to the liver and to the solar plexus. They were working like a fine-tuned machine. I really admired Duran's work in this fight, and to me it was like he was showing the world something was wrong with the Sugar Ray Leonard fight, but I'm here tonight and this is what I could do. And Davey Moore paid for it. Would you agree with that, Scrapbook?
Absolutely. Davey Moore didn't think he was going to have that kind of a problem. His cornerman didn't think he was going to have that kind of a problem with Roberto Duran, because not so much the no mas in this conversation I'm not having with you, but because Roberto Duran, you never knew what Roberto Duran you were going to get. And he had to move up in weight division. This is for the junior middleweight championship. It was just for his third title. He was trying to get a third title. He had won the lightweight championship, like I said, in 72 from Ken Buchanan. He won in 1980 the welterweight championship, and he was going for the junior middleweight championship. That would have been his third title. It was on his birthday. He was trying to redeem himself for the no mas. And 90% of the audience was for Roberto Duran. So he had a lot going for him. But the skill set, like I said, it's unbelievable because he was hitting him underneath the heart. It's a certain skill you have to do to position a man in order to get a punch like that off, especially a man who's boxing like Davey Moore, bouncing with his legs. He was hitting him like you sit in a breadbasket. A lot of people don't know what the breadbasket is. He was hitting a man in the solar plexus. He was hitting him in the floating rib. Do you know overhand right? Tim Witherspoon was a master at that. The overhand right above the temple, what it does to your left leg. Your S1, it destroys that. It's the reason why punches are thrown. They're called setup punches. And like I said, when Roberto Duran, he feinted the left hook. He wanted to miss the left hook so that Davey Miller didn't see the right hand coming. And when he dropped that right hand on Davey Moore, that's a textbook right hand. You can't get a better right hand thrown. It's a Joe Louis right hand. And down went Davey Moore. And that's how you can tell how beautiful the punch is thrown, how it lands, and what the response is of the fighter that caught the punch. He went down, as they say, on the seat of his pants. And the back of his neck went on the bottom strand of the rope. It jerked. It damaged his spine even more. He got up because of the determination and heart that Davey Moore had. But he had nothing to offer in that fight because of the skill set of Roberto Duran. Unbelievable fighter he was, and that was some fight.
I wanted to ask you if he was able to get a third fight faster with Leonard, what do you think would have happened? Because as we go through these fights with Roberto Duran, we're going to find out that he even raised his game even higher than this. But what do you think? I'm just throwing that question out there at you, Scrap. If he had a chance to get a third fight with Leonard during this time, what do you think could have possibly taken place?
Well, what I saw in the second fight leading up to the No Mas, Roberto Duran's problem has always been his problem. Not so much just a cutie pie, but a mental game. If he's not focused, he gets discouraged. Ray Leonard was becoming somewhat of a master at discouraging fighters. But to answer your question directly, I don't know if he would have been able to defeat Leonard in the third fight, because they did fight 3 times. And he lost to him in the third fight. But if you're asking if he would have fought immediately, I would say I would still have to go with Leonard, because that would never happen to Leonard. It would happen to Davey Moore. Not at all. Leonard was ringside. In fact, I believe he was announcing the fight. That would have never happened to Leonard. Because, see, Leonard's game is totally different. And Leonard understands the concept of ploy. He's somewhat of a master at ploy. He understands what you're trying to sell him. And Davey Moore didn't understand that at all. And that's the reason why, as good as Davey Moore was, but as good as he was, game, because Roberto Duran knew the textbook. He understood the science. He understood old school.
I would like to think that if he had been given that chance earlier, because he fought years later with Leonard, who still had much over him athletically, I would have thought that would be a different type of contested fight. I don't think it would have been anything like the No Mas fight. I think it would have been a fight where if Leonard beat him, he would have beat him in a fight that might have been similar to the first fight, maybe without the brawling or as much of the brawling. But Duran would have put a different type of, he would have brought a different type of attitude to the fight because of what he showed us in these next subsequent fights that we're going to talk about. But that's what I thought. I'm not trying to even imply that Leonard would have lost to him, because I think Leonard realized what the blueprint was, but it would not have been an easy fight. Just like his rematch with Tommy Hearns was not an easy fight. You know, he knocked Hearns out the first time. He damn near got knocked out by Hearns in the second fight, even though it was 8 years later. But it's just a testament to Duran and the fighter he was, coming up from the lower weight, you know, the Ken Buchanan fight, you know, these guys that he was able to really beat with skill, because Duran was one of the greatest defensive fighters that we had seen during that era. As you stated, he would make fighters think that he was getting hit with solid shots by grunting, throwing his head around, making his hair, you know, swing or whatever. And he would rock away from shots, come back and counter, roll and counter, step around. And he had this little thing that he would do with his hands when he's on the outside of you, and he'd throw his 1-2 off of it, but it was hard to time because you couldn't tell. He didn't telegraph his shots. And again, that's a skill that is kind of going by the wayside, not telegraphing your shots, because people can look at you and pick up what your tendency is. Durant was able to get shots off cleanly without guys being able to detect that they were coming. What do you have to offer on that aspect of his skill, technical wise, Scrap?
Yeah, technical wise, like I said, Roberto Duran was unbelievable. I remember when he fought a fighter by the name of Estefan de Jesus. And to answer your question, to finish it with the Leonard, that's one of the reasons. When he fought Estefan de Jesus, when he fought there's another good example. Kirkland Lane was another good example. There were spots in there. But also when he fought Benitez. When he fought Benitez, he lost to Benitez because of that. See, Benitez was another old school. He had old school skills. He was one of the best defensive fighters. Duran gets frustrated. That's the problem with Duran. So I don't think he would have beaten Leonard if they fought right away in the third fight because of that reason. It had nothing to do with his skill set. It's mental after that point. But his skill set was unbelievable. That's why he's rated number 3, greatest lightweight champion or fighter in my pound-for-pound list of all times. That reason right there. Because of his skill set, because of his IQ, because he knows how to set traps, because he knows how to set you up for punches that you are looking at, but get caught with a different punch. At the time, he's about to throw that first punch. A lot of people can't do that. So, yes, Roberto Duran's skill set was A+.
Yeah, man, it was really something to see him come back in this fight against Davey Moore. And again, when you look at a person's body of work, like Duran fought Leonard, he fought Hearns, he fought Hagler, and he fought the best at the weights where they were. And this wasn't one of those things of beating guys that in today's era, we see so much of guys can win belts in multiple divisions because there's so many champions and everything, but they're not necessarily defeating the cream of the division. For an example, if Saul Canelo Alvarez had gone up to 175 and knocked out Beterbiev, we'd be like, oh crap, that's a victory, right? But because he knocked out a fading Kovalev, who may not have even been given his best effort anyway, it takes a little gloss off the surface. So when you see Duran moving up and taking on Sugar Ray Leonard, or you see him moving up and he's taking on Tommy Hearns, or you see him moving up and he's taking on Marvin Hagler, it's like, dude, he's taking on assassin after assassin after assassin. So you have to give him credit. Whether he won, lost, or draw with fighters, he fought at a level of like high competition, and that makes a difference in the sport. Give us your thought on that alone with Duran before we move forward, Scrapbook, on doing that and the significance of a fighter who can move up and take on the class of a division in an era where we don't see that much anymore.
Well, Roberto Duran came around a time when you had Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hitman Hearns, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, Benitez. I remember when Benitez fought a guy by the name, he's from Canada. His name was Matthew Hilton. It was 5 brothers. You had guys like Hilton. You had all of these kind of guys. McCallum, all of them started coming up. Curry, all those guys started coming when Roberto Duran was still around. So he was never dismissed of competition. he was always around fighters who were the cream of the crop. So you have to consider somewhat of afraid of Thomas Hearns. He just had that feeling. And it showed up in that fight when he was stopped and knocked out. But Roberto Duran, when you had some of the greatest fighters in his era, and he challenged just about all of them. And I have Roberto Duran, like I said, number 3 greatest lightweight of all times. And he's very high in my ranking system in boxing history. He was some fighter, Roberto Duran. Unbelievable.
Thank you for that, brother. And we'll move next to the next fighter that Duran moved up against again and took on the challenge. And if you notice with the visual that I put on the screen, his fight with Davey Moore made the cover of Sports Illustrated. And his next fight where he moved up made the cover of Sports Illustrated as well, where he took on the Marvelous Marvin Hagler in a scheduled 15-round fight where most people at the time agreed that Marvelous Marvin Hagler was the best middleweight in the world. I believe he was undisputed, and he was the lion of that division. And Duran went up there and decided to challenge Mr. Hagler. So set that one up for us, Scrapbook.
Oh, I was at that fight also. It took place October 11th, 1983. And Duran had already defeated Davey Moore at this point. So he figured, let me try and get another title. But this is going back to when you asked me about him defeating Ray Leonard, or how he would have done with Ray Leonard had they fought a third time right away. You get into a different class of men. As with Benitez, as with Thomas Hearns, as with Marvelous Marvin Hagler. This fight was something else. This was unbelievable. 15 rounds. And it was going back and forth. It was going back and forth. Duran had his moments. Hagler had his moment. Hagler couldn't get Duran out of there because of his savvy, because of his ring generalship, because of the ploy tactic, because he knew how to set up punches. And I was very shocked. I was in the 5th row of this particular fight, and you can hear the punches, the body punches thrown by Marvelous Marvin Hagler. And Roberto Duran was taking them. I mean, it's amazing the kind of ability to take punishment Roberto had to give his back. A lot of people underestimate the ability he had to absorb punishment. Because Roberto Duran would be 185 pounds. I'm giving a little bit of an exaggeration, but that's how he was. And he'll be fighting maybe at welterweight. But he had the ability to absorb punishment. And for him to be able to accomplish what he has accomplished, you have to be able to do that. And in that Hagler fight, he was getting body punches thrown at him. And I was very impressed. As you can see the picture right here, Marvin Hagler's left eye swollen. Fight. It was a beautiful fight, but he was just a little bit short of defeating a great fighter like Marvin Hagler. Hagler was a southpaw, and it was a very hard, straight puncher, had a beautiful jab. And it was just amazing. A lot of people were disappointed in Hagler because he didn't destroy Duran, but that's Roberto Duran. That's not going to happen necessarily. So Hagler did get the victory, but it was a very good fight between both men, and I was impressed with Roberto Duran in that fight. Absolutely.
Yeah, I looked at this fight as a situation where Hagler had a lot of respect for Duran's skill set, and it showed up in his performance. Would you agree with that? That he was looking at Hagler was looking at Duran's skill set and was wary of it. He didn't want to get tricked or pulled into a trick bag by Duran.
Yes, I agree with that. I think that's what happened too. That's what threw him off. I think he was very careful in his approach, He was very calculating on what he was doing, and it took a lot of the snap off of his punches as well as his execution. Roberto Duran can have that presence to you, but I do believe Marvin Hagler did have a lot of respect for Roberto Duran.
1 second there, Scrapbook. We got some buffering that's going on here with our show, and I don't know why, because everything was like on the money, and now it's decided to start acting up. I know that there are more people using the internet and stuff like that now because everybody's at home and stuff. But this is a situation that I haven't run into in a long time. And I just want to hold tight for a moment to see if things are going to clear up, because it's just, there's a consistent buffering that's taking place at this very moment. You and I can hear each other.
I can hear each other. I see it too.
Yeah, we can hear each other with no problem, but the listeners and viewers, it's buffering really bad for them right now, and I don't know why. We're like almost an hour into the show, so let's hold tight for 1 second.
Can we ask them if they're hearing us clearly, or you think they're not really getting it?
They can't even hear us right now with the way that it's buffering, because I got on my playback, it's like I'm not hearing absolutely anything. So, and I can see on my second screen here that it's just the buffering circle going around. We've even dropped off to 9 viewers watching right now at the moment, because it's just been, and I really don't know what to do besides to just see if I could wait this out. 1 second.
Do you think we have to restart, or you're going to try and see what?
No, because my analytics are saying my analytics is saying the stream is healthy. But in the data section, it's saying no data. YouTube is not currently receiving data for the stream. If you believe this is incorrect, ensure you are sending a stream and that it is configured with the correct stream key. That's all fine, because when we began, it was we've been doing the show. We're like 45, almost 50 minutes into the show. This is YouTube. It's not me.
No, I get it. It might be going all across the board, right?
Yeah, because we are. God bless, man. This is. We are. When it's saying that the stream is healthy, then that means that it's beyond my control, because this has something to do with either the internet itself, or like whatever the data stream is to connect the show or whatever. But it's not us. It's something to do with the transferring of the show, the broadcast. This is really wild. I mean,
man, that's crazy. It is.
Wow.
Is anyone else dropping off?
Like 4 people watching right now, because it just.
So we may as well just close it, you think, huh?
We may have to finish out the show if you want to do that.
Yeah, let's try it. See what happens.
Okay, now listen. It just came back. It just came back on its own just now. I'm hearing the feedback in my ear.
Yeah, I see that. Okay.
See? That's crazy.
So let's finish cooking, brother.
Okay. So, I was asking you a question to cook on something specific.
Yeah, we were talking.
And I was asking, I thought that Hagler was concerned with Duran's technical skill and ability. He had a certain amount of respect for that, and he didn't wade in like he would normally do against fighters he had fought, even though he had fought a myriad of tough fighters and different styles and stuff like that. But Duran was a different beast because he could hurt you in a variety of ways. Like, he could box with you. Like I said, he had a great 1-2, but he had great body punching, and he could fight on the inside. So things like that, I think Hagler respected that and didn't want to go in there, not acknowledging the level of fighter he was fighting against. And I think that held him back a little bit and kept Duran in the fight because he had those notions. And that's what my question was to you. Did you feel the same?
Yes, and that's the thing. I could see from where I was sitting, I could see that Marvin Hagler didn't execute and he didn't commit to a lot of the punches that he normally would in a fight other than Roberto Duran. It seemed like he respected Roberto Duran more than any other fighter that I've seen him fight before. And Marvin Hagler's been in there with some great fighters. Real quickly, 1973 is when he turned professional. The very next year, he was in there with an Olympic champion, Sugar Ray Seals. Sugar Ray Seals was a 1972 Olympic gold medalist. And he drew with him. That was his first blemish. Then he would have two fights with two Philadelphia fighters, Bobby Boogaloo Watts and Willie the Worm Monroe in 76. And unfortunately for him, that same year, a young man out of Maryland who would win the gold medal in the junior welterweight division, his name was Sugar Ray Leonard. And he always seemed to have, and I did a story on Hagler, always seemed to have fighters around him that would outshine him one way or the other. So this was a great opportunity for him because he figured, let me get in there with Duran because Leonard fought Duran and Leonard is taking a shine from me. I want to do better with him. And he was disappointed that he didn't knock him out, but it was because he was a little passive. I mean, I'm going out on a limb saying that, but I think he showed too much respect for Roberto Duran, especially after that fight a couple of months earlier with Davey Moore. And he just showed a lot of respect for him. He was very careful in his approach. And I think that's what hampered that fight for him. Roberto Duran was very clever in his approach with Marvin Hagler.
Yes, sir. And we are back, and we got back up to it's like 19, 20 people watching us again. So that thank God there are people that hung in there with us through this. We're sorry for that technical difficulty, ladies and gentlemen. That was not us. It was the system, and it was something beyond our control. But we're back and we're rolling and cooking. Scrapbook, the next fighter that I wanted to move on to, because we have something else that we're going to present with the people beyond Duran, is the Duran-Iran Barkley fight. Man. What can you tell us about that fight? And please, I know you said you were at all three of them, so you can go ahead and cook on it, brother. Go ahead.
Iran Barkley had defeated Thomas Hearns. I was at that fight in Las Vegas. He won the WBC middleweight championship belt. He came around the neighborhood, and because he had moved to New Jersey at that point, but he came around the neighborhood, and everybody was so proud, doing a parade. And when Iran Barkley got wind that he was going to fight Roberto Duran, it was redemption for him for what he did to Davey Moore. Now, Davey Moore at this point in time had already passed away. He was fixing his car in his driveway. I think he was changing his oil or something, and the car wasn't quite in park. I think it was in neutral when it ran over him. So they were trying to give as much support to Davey Moore as they possibly could. By taking a fight with Roberto Duran, they figured that would help do that, clear the air. And I gotta tell you, that fight was something else. That was a great fight with Roberto Duran. The Roberto Duran that we knew from the past showed up that night. It was at middleweight. He was destined to try and get a middleweight championship belt. He tried it with Hagler. He was unsuccessful. But that fight between Roberto Duran and Iran Blade Barkley, I was in the second row of that fight. And the punches, the Athletic Club, and he could really punch. Remember when he fought Doug DeWitt and Kitchen and all of them guys. Iran Barkley. But Roberto Duran showed up that night. He showed up that night. We were all shocked. He went exchange with Iran Barkley. And he showed Iran Barkley some moves that Iran Barkley had never seen before. But he was very determined. He didn't give up. He didn't quit. He fought back. And that was one of the best fights that I've seen in Atlantic City in a long time. I was very happy to be at that fight because Roberto Duran showed old tricks that he showed in the Davey Moore fight. But Roberto Duran just couldn't execute it at that weight level that he did in the junior middleweight division with Iran Barkley. Giving credit to Iran Barkley, he was a much harder puncher than Davey Moore. So he didn't experience any of that. But he was going back and forth with Davey Moore. Iran Barkley was a hell of a fighter. Very underrated fighter was Iran Barkley. And Roberto Duran showed his wit in that fight because of the ability he had to absorb the punches of Iran Barkley. And the way he was able to break Barkley down, and he dropped him. I think it was the round before last. Oh, man, I think that's what gave him the fight. But everybody was on their feet that night. It was a great... And I got to say, Roberto Duran, that helped his legacy. That really did. That was a hell of a fight. Roberto Duran, Iran Blade Barkley.
That fight was so exciting, man. The people in that, arena, you could hear it on the television because that's where I saw it on TV. They were yelling, they were screaming, but the combination that Duran threw to put Barkley on the canvas, it was one of the best combinations. And matter of fact, for a while, it was on highlight reels of boxing. When they were showing something, they would always show that combination of him throwing against Barkley to put him on the canvas. It was similar to the combination that Buster Douglas threw to put Tyson on the canvas. But at the same time, it was a captured highlight moment of the way that Duran fought. One thing he never really got credit for, and I'm sure you would agree with this once I say it, Scrapbook, and it's like it's an acknowledgement, but also something that was dismissed. He threw hellacious combinations. He knew how to put his punches together. In other words, when not just throwing 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, but it was like it didn't matter where he started the combination, whether it was coming underneath to your body and then working his way up top, whether it was working his way up top, going back down to the body. Duran threw beautiful combinations. When he put his punches together, if someone was there to be hit, they were there to be hurt. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. The combinations were amazing. They were absolutely amazing. And that's why when you want to study certain fighters, there's certain things about that fighter you want to study. And if you want to study the combinations and set up punches leading into that combination, you watch Roberto Duran. He was a master at that. Any weight division he fought at. And that's one of the reasons why you're correct, why the arena stood up. Because they appreciated the setup punch before Barkley went down. It was beautiful. Beautiful. You can hear it, da-da-da. And then the final punch, and he went down. And Iran Barkley actually smiled, and he patted Roberto Duran and said, "You got me on that one." He took him to school. Beautiful, beautiful combinations thrown to set up that knockdown punch against Iran Barkley. Roberto Duran was a master. He was amazing. And Iran Barkley had a lot of respect for Roberto Duran after that fight. He actually embraced him because he realized he was in there with a true professional.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the type of fight that it was a fight fans fight. You know, maybe these guys were not the so-called glamour of boxing or the divisions, but because of how they fought, Barkley and Duran, and how they brought it as professionals. They always brought what they had on the night. Iran Barkley was a guy that some people would even call like a journeyman, which was kind of disrespectful because he was a champion and he fought like a champion. He may not have had technical sound skills like some of the other elite fighters of the era, but he became a champion because of what he brought to the ring. And that can't be denied. You could take Iran Barkley today and he'll be an all-time great amongst these guys of today. Would you agree with that, Scrapbook?
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about Iran Barkley. Iran Barkley, he defeated fighters such as Schoolboy Van Horn. He was undefeated at that time, knocked him out with a beautiful punch. Never saw it coming. I was at the Madison Square Garden when he took on James the Heat Kinchin. Kinchin didn't have to take that fight. He was ranked number 1 for Marvin Hagler's belt. But he took the fight and he wound up losing. Iran Barkley fought Michael Elijah Day. I remember when they were promoting that fight. I was at the fight at the Garden. So Iran Barkley is very underrated. I remember when he fought Nigel Benn. In the first round, he got dropped and he got hit in the back of the head and he couldn't continue because of the foul that was presented to him. But he never really complained. He went in there and he fought whoever he fought, gave it his best, and he won the championship. He even went up and won the light heavyweight championship from Thomas Hearns. Thomas Hearns took that belt away from Virgil Hill. Iran Barkley was unbelievable. That was a WBA light heavyweight championship belt. He was amazing. He's very underrated, and I hold him very high as a fighter. I knew him personally. He was a good person, but he is a good person, excuse me. But Iran Barkley is very underrated, and that's a shame because he was a hell of a fighter. I remember when he fought James Toney and Michael Nunn. He was in there with everybody. So you have to give the respect to Iran Barkley.
Yes, sir. And he eventually moved up to heavyweight. He fought at heavyweight. Iran Barkley was something, man.
Yes, he fought Trevor Burbick before. I'm sorry. He fought Trevor Burbick before he passed away, R.I.P. to him. But he was in there with everybody. He was. Amazing fighter, Iran Barkley.
Absolutely. Now, I'd like to take it in a different direction. Respect to Roberto Duran and his accomplishments in the sport. A fighter, Manos Dia Pietra, also known as El Cholo, and ended his career with a record of 103-16. And out of his 16 knockouts in those fights, 103 fights, he was only KO'd 4 times. So, and those KOs weren't always like knocked cold either. It was like TKO stoppages. You know, he quit in the Leonard fight, and it just, he losses that he took his losses like a man. And that's another way to look at Roberto Duran, a man, like they call Sonny Liston, a man.
Amen.
Go ahead, Scrap.
One final thing on that. Roberto Duran, after that fight, Michael Carbajal was in the audience, and he wanted to go and meet Roberto Duran. This happened because I'm looking at it. And Roberto Duran knew who Michael Carbajal was, and he picked him up. That's how Michael Carbajal got the nickname Little Hands of Stone from Roberto Duran. He gave him that name right there after the fight. You are my little hands of stone. And that's when Michael Carbajal was coined Little Hands of Stone. You can ask Michael Carbajal himself. I'm standing there looking at it. And it was amazing because he embraced them so much. Carbajal began to cry. And that's the effect that Roberto Duran had on people. He really cared about people. And this was after he defeated and won a middleweight championship belt from Iran Barkley. And I just want to throw that in there. He was a humanitarian.
Absolutely, man. And Duran did a lot for his people behind the scenes, too. Some people just don't realize that it doesn't matter. It's not about the color or ethnicity or country or something when these fighters participate in this wonderful sport that we love. It's about what's inside the person. And that's what drives the sport of boxing more than anything. The character and the underlayment of a fighter, what that foundation really is. And Duran was a true warrior. He is to be respected. And we are pretty much somewhat paying homage and tribute to him for his career in this segment of the show. So hats off to Roberto Duran. I wanted to take us in another direction now, where we're going to go ahead and speak a bit on a fighter who is one of Kurt Sugar's favorite fighters. It is Kurt Sugar's favorite fighter, Sugar Ray Robinson. And because Scrapbook Boxing has a great deal more wealth of knowledge regarding Sugar Ray Robinson than myself, I would like Scrap to open up with this and just kind of give our listeners and viewers a little bit of backdrop on the man that was called Sugar.
Well, Sugar Ray Robinson was a different fighter than any fighter you're ever going to see. Various reasons. He was from Alley, Georgia, and he was brought over to Detroit as a young man. And it was at that point he met Joe Louis. He carried his bags for him in a gymnasium. It was Brewster Center. It was a gymnasium that Joe Louis fought out of. And then eventually his mother would bring him over to Harlem. And he would tap dance and, he would do a lot of street things to try to earn money. But it was 1938 that really made Sugar Ray Robinson. Before he was Ray Robinson, he was Walker Smith. He hadn't changed his name yet. Really made him stand out in Harlem. Because before Ray Robinson, you had a fighter by the name of Harry Smith. It was called the Harlem Thunderbolt. And he would win the Metropolitan Amateur Championships. Now, what the Metropolitan Amateur Championships was, you had New Jersey, Connecticut, and New York. So you were the best out of those three states. And the only other fighter to do that before him was Harry Smith and Larry Ettridge. They were both colored middleweight champions as well. So Ray Robinson, in 1938, he was a bantamweight, and he won the title AAU, Amateur Championships. It was the Metropolitan version of it. That's a hard thing to do. Now, Ray Robinson is a lot younger than what his record says, because he had to change his identity in order to get into the AAU Championships. He had to be 18 years old. So he borrowed a card from a person that he didn't know. He was a former fighter, and he wasn't going back to the gym anymore. His name was Ray Robinson. Harry Wiley Sr., who ran the gym at the Salem Cressers Club. And he also was a part, I wouldn't say ownership, but he ran Grubb's Gym as well. That's located on 116th Street in Harlem. So in 1938 was one of the most special years for black fighters. How so? When Ray Robinson won a bantamweight championship for the AAU Metropolitan, no one has ever done that, like I said before, Larry Estridge and Harry Smith. So that was a great accomplishment. But then you also had another fighter in Cincinnati. His name was Ezra Charles, and he accomplished the same feat. You also had a man in Connecticut. His name was Willie Pep. He did the exact same thing. It's in 38. And you also had Burt Littell, Jimmy Bivens. All of them were doing that. They were competing against each other. But in 38, the reason why it was significant for black fighters is because that same year, Charlie Burley had taken the colored welterweight championship belt from Coco Kid. You also had Henry Armstrong, who became a three-time world lineal champion in 38. He defeated Petey Cerrone in 37. He went up to welterweight to face Barney Ross and down to lightweight to face Lou Ambers. But he tied it all up in 38. In the light heavyweight division, you had John Henry Lewis, who was a kin of Tom Molyneux. he became the light heavyweight champion when he defeated Bob Bowman in 1935. But he was currently light heavyweight champion in 1938. And Joe Louis, who knocked out Jimmy Braddock in 1937 to become the first black fighter in the heavyweight division to win that crown outside of Jack Johnson in 1908. He was the heavyweight champion in 1938. So that was some year for black fighters. In 1939, Ray Robinson would win the featherweight Golden Gloves when he defeated a fighter by the name of Spider Valentine. His name was Louis Spider Valentine. Now, pause on 1 second. A lot of people don't know this, but Harry Smith, as he got up in years, right before he passed away, he got jobs for Ray Robinson, a guy by the name of Danny Cox, who was a heavyweight, Spider Valentine. He got them all, and Joe Sadler. Sandy Sadler was originally from Boston, but he would hang out in Harlem. Got all them guys jobs at the Harlem Opera House, located on 125th Street. It was not too far from the Teresa Hotel. They call it the Hotel Teresa, but everyone knows that it's the Teresa Hotel. And that's amazing because no black person ever worked at the Harlem Opera House doing the jobs that they did. They were clerks and they were also doormen. So that was an accomplishment. You also had Ray Robinson go up in 1940 to win the lightweight championship in the Golden Gloves. That was amazing because that has not been done before. So that same year, he returned professional against a fighter by the name of Joe Escoveria when he defeated him on the undercard of Henry Armstrong and Fitzy Zivic. Same night, October 4th, 1940. And 1 year after that, in 1941, he had an opportunity to fight a fighter by the name of Sammy Engot. And it turned out to be a non-title fight because Engot didn't make weight. Robinson could have been a lightweight champion had that not happened. Next year, 1942, he was supposed to fight a fighter by the name of Marty Servo, who was a welterweight champion. Fight was delayed, and before you know it, the war came out. So Ray Robinson had to wait 4 years for him to get another opportunity at a title shot. By that point in time, he wound up fighting a guy by the name of, take a water real quick, of Tommy Bell. Tommy Bell was from Ohio. He was a very hard puncher. And he was ranked number 7, and he wound up being ranked number 1 because of technicalities on other fighters. And he got, number 2, and he got that shot with Ray Robinson. And Ray Robinson, I'm telling you, that fight was something else. I did a profile on that the other day. 6th round, Ray Robinson was dropped. And this shows the testament of a man. When he got hit with that overhand right hand by Tommy Bell, he was on one knee. And he could have quit in that fight because he was hurt very badly. But he wound up getting up after he took the count. And the boxing display that he showed after getting knocked down from Tommy Bell was a thing of beauty. Opened up with combinations. He danced. He moved. He parried. He was able to turn Tommy Bell. And Tommy Bell never landed a punch for the rest of that round. He wound up knocking Tommy Bell out in the 11th round. But that was an outstanding accomplishment. He became a welterweight champion in 1946. That's amazing. He was in there with fighters such as Tommy Bell, from from Ohio. He was in there with guys like Joey Archer and Jose Basora and Charlie Fusari and Steve Belois, Young King Buffalo, Bernard Dukeson, Ozzie Bulldog Harris, who's from Pittsburgh, California Jackie Wilson, and Georgie Abrams, Cecil Hudson. I mean, think of these names. Artie Levine. The Artie Levine fight, Artie Levine was from Brooklyn. One of the hardest punches that Ray Robinson ever fought. They fought in Cleveland. And it was a long count because Artie Levine dropped Ray Robinson. And they had somewhat of a 20 count, but the bell saved them. And Ray Robinson could have got knocked out. But he didn't, and he wound up knocking out Artie Levine. So that was a scare for most people in Cleveland Arena at that time. He was in there with George Sugar Costner. The funny story of that fight was Ray Robinson didn't like the fact that George Sugar Costner used the name Sugar. And he told him when they were called into the middle of the ring for ring instructions, you're not going to last one round. And he knocked him out in one round. He fought the Choice O'Neal Bell, very hard puncher, Ralph Zanelli, just to give an example of some of the fighters he fought. But June 5th, 1950, he would win a Pennsylvania middleweight championship belt from a fighter by the name of Robert Villemain. It was a vacant belt, and he became the Pennsylvania middleweight champion. February 14th, 1951, he would win the World Welterweight Championship belt, Chicago Stadium from Jake LaMotta, 13-round knockout. Now, they fought 5 times before that fight, and Ray Robinson had defeated him in 42, lost to him in 43. 3 weeks later, he defeated Jake LaMotta, and then defeated him for the rest of the times. But that was some series that Jake LaMotta and Sugar Ray Robinson fight. Then he would lose and regain his middleweight championship belt to England's Randy Turpin in 1951. Once in England, and then he would regain it at the Polo Grounds in New York. Unbelievable. It was, I'm trying to think of the dates, July 10th, 1951 and September 12th, 1951, if I'm correct. June 25th, 1952, he was unable to come out of the corner in the 14th round due to heat exhaustion when he faced a fighter by the name of Joey Maximus for the light heavyweight championship belt. Now, the problem that Ray Robinson had, he was doing a lot of nightlife when he was over in England. And he fought in 3 different countries, had 7 fights in a matter of 21 days. I mean, you can't do those kinds of things and become champion. But he had a masseuse, he had a midget, he had a tailor, he had a little boy who was on his left side the whole time. And every time mud would smudge on his shoes, the boy's job was to wipe the smudge off the shoes. That's the kind of person Ray Robinson, that's the lifestyle he was living at that time. But he was some person, Ray Robinson. You know, he had 132 fights with 3 losses at the end of the Maxim fight. Then he would make a comeback and he would fight fighters such as Gene Foreman, Carmen Basilio, and he was in there with Paul Pender and Terry Downs, where he couldn't win the title back anymore because Ray Robinson was 45 years old when he retired in 1965. And he just didn't have the legs anymore. But the kind of puncher he was, the kind of fighter he was, he did things that you don't see today. He could punch you going backwards, as he did with Gene Foreman. He can hit you with punches. He was the master of the hook off the jab. You don't see that today. He would set up a jab, he would hook off it, and then he would jab you again. He would jab you to the body, jab you to the head. He would turn to the side and hit you to the solar plexus. I've seen him knock out men with quadruple left hooks. You can ask Hans Stretch that. I mean, one of the greatest combination punches that you would ever see. And that's why I can understand Curtis Anderson, my brother, having Ray Robinson rated #1 as the greatest fighter of all times. Because what he has accomplished. A lot of people take him for granted. Like I said, he could have won a lightweight championship in 1941. But Sammy Ingard didn't make weight, 42. But Marty Servo was delaying the contract. And then the war broke out. He had to wait 4 years for an opportunity in the welterweight division. He was ranked #1 for 4 years. And he wound up getting that shot with Tommy Bell. And then he wound up fighting Jake LaMotta for the middleweight championship belt. Tried to go up and fight Joey Maxim. He won every round. Had he finished the fight, he would have been the light heavyweight champion of the world. And what we fail to understand is when the title was frozen, Tony Zale as middleweight had that championship, you couldn't fight for the title. So who's to know how many times he would have either won the title, defended the title, at what age he would have won that title? You know what I mean? How many knockouts he would have had. So it's hard to put it in perspective as to what Ray Robinson's career could have actually been because, and other fighters during that time, but specifically Ray Robinson, because of the title being frozen. It's amazing. Now, they say Charlie Burley was ducked by Ray Robinson. Timeline doesn't add up. And Ray Robinson didn't duck anyone. It may seem like he did, but he didn't duck anyone. He was a very smart, intellectual person. He knew what fights to take that would get him the most money, but at the same time, that made sense. And you have to look at it from that perspective. But Ray Robinson, to me, I have him ranked #3 as the greatest fighter in history. I have Sam Langford #1, Harry Greb #2, and Ray Robinson #3. Henry Armstrong #4. Ray Robinson was the greatest pound-for-pound fighter. Now, he was given that name. He was coined pound for pound because you had to have something for these guys. The heavyweight fighter at that time was the man. And you had to use a man in between all those weights because the lightweights, they didn't punch as hard as the heavyweights. And the welterweights and middleweights, they didn't dance as good as the lighter weights. So you had to coin somewhat of a middleweight or a welterweight, the best pound for pound. And Ray Robinson fit that description. He could box. He could punch. He had one of the best defenses. He was resilient. Best combination punches at that time. He was in there with the greats of the greats, such as Ralph Dupas and Kid Gavilan. I mean, he fought Kid Gavilan twice, fought Sammy Ingot 3 times, Carl Bobo Olsen 4 times, Gene Foreman fought him 3 times, but he won once and lost twice. Carmen Basilio won once and lost twice. Denny Moyer, these are all great fighters. Joey Giardello, who was a middleweight champion of the world, he's from Brooklyn. He moved to Cherry Hill and wound up moving to Philadelphia. Izzy Janazzo fought him 4 times. Maxie Berger, Fitzy Zivit. I mean, he unbelievable, 2 times. Randy Turpin fought him twice, split victories with him. When you want to name a fighter as one of the greatest of all times, you can't forget Sugar Ray Robinson. My brother Curtis Anderson, salute to you. I know that's your favorite fighter. I wanted to give a little tribute. And I can't think of a better fighter to package all into one man than the great Sugar Ray Robinson.
Man, that's excellent, bro.
Excellent, bro.
I don't think we can go any further than that right there. And I know you've got some things you want to get to. So with that, I would like to just thank everybody out there that was able to come in and even hang with us through the technical difficulties that we experienced. Thank goodness everything corrected itself. As you can see, it wasn't on our end. It was the system. It's the airwaves of YouTube or whatever. So this was a great boxing conversation. We had a counterpoint featuring Roberto Duran on matches, and then we had a tribute of Sugar Ray Robinson, who happens to be Kurt Sugar's favorite fighter. Since Kurt was not able to be with us today, he's under the weather. We want to respect Kurt by speaking on something that he would have had a tremendous amount of passion to speak about, and that was the great fighter Sugar Ray Robinson. You just heard Scrapbook Boxing cooking on that. It's been a wonderful show. I want to take the time out to say salute to everybody that joined us for this afternoon's and now this morning and now afternoon show. As we go forward, just remember this: as the Three Wise Men of Boxing show speaks on the sport, there is so much that we can cover that because of the history of the sport, we'll never run out of topics. Okay, never. But it's just so that you all can come in and hear some quality boxing talk, the history of the sport, what's happening presently, the various manners of how what went on during history affected the sport, as well as how the sport mirrored what was happening in history. So a number of those things and subjects could be a part of what we talk about on this show. And I am so fortunate to have gentlemen like Kurt Sugar and Scrapbook Boxing be a part of this process with me as we present this to you, the good, great listening audience that we have here. I will take a moment to give Scrapbook a chance to say final words, and then we'll sign off.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Stormy B. It was a great show. I know that we had some buffering. I apologize on behalf of us. Obviously, it wasn't our channel. It was something to do with YouTube or the internet. So we tried our very best to pick up where we left off. And I want to thank everyone who hung in there for us. I want everybody to be very careful out there. We've got a epidemic that's going on that's very dangerous to everyone. So you got to take your time. Be very diligent in your hygiene and just be careful because it's hurting a lot of us in the community. I want to shout out to my brother Curtis Anderson. Make sure he's doing fine. I want everybody to think of him. And like I said at the beginning, Curtis is amazing when it comes to boxing, but he's an amazing person. And we want to keep him in our prayers as well. Stormy B, thank you so much for the platform and the opportunity. I would like one day if we can talk about Madison Square Garden, all the great fights that took place in Madison Square Garden. It was designed by Barnum and Bailey. They created the circus, and it was moved all over the place. It was moved three different locations, and that would be a great topic one day. But I'm here for the long haul, man. And thank you so much for the time, and thanks for all the members in the chat. Salute.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And as we close out the show, I want everybody, again, to reiterate what Scrapbook just said. Be safe out there. Take everything to heart and to note about we're dealing with a serious pandemic here. And I just want everyone to be safe with their families and keep your loved ones in. And if you've got teenage youngsters, pull them in, rein them in. I've seen teenagers out on the streets and everything playing around like there's nothing wrong. Listen, man, this is a serious thing. Okay. And for your teenagers that's out there in the streets, maybe they can come in contact with something and they can bring it home to you. You old parents who's sitting up with diabetes and everything and high blood pressure and everything, predisposed, you can get in trouble. Okay. So pull your teens in the house. Make them do some work around the house, chores, clean up something, throw out old stuff you want to get rid of, paint, do stuff. There's plenty of things that they could do instead of just walking down the street with their pants hanging off their behinds and everything. Bring their butts in the house, okay? And make them take baths and wash their hands several times a day. Because teenagers sometimes don't want to even wash their damn feet. Got your damn house smelling like corn chips and everything. Do what I said, okay? Just remember, this is Stormy B, man, and we signing off. 3 Wise Men of Boxing. We'll catch you next week, same time, same channel. Peace.
Peace.